The man at the end of the table had 3 degrees, a wall of awards, and a spreadsheet so dense it looked like it needed its own server. He spoke for 12 minutes straight. Charts, terms, probability models, trend lines. Everyone in the room nodded like they understood. No one did. Not really, not fully. Not enough to question him. Across from him, an older woman who'd worked the floor for 30 years said quietly, "We could just check what worked last time." A pause. Then silence. Then the meeting moved on. She was right. Everyone knew it. But no one wanted to sound small. No one wanted to be the one who said, "Maybe the answer's not complicated." There's something strange that happens in rooms like that. People don't just ignore common sense. They run from it. They bury it under jargon, dress it up in theory, or pretend it wasn't there to begin with. The more obvious something is, the faster it's dismissed. The simple idea makes people nervous. It strips away their shield of complexity. It forces them to face something raw. Maybe it's not that hard. Maybe it's just uncomfortable. And so the dance begins. Complexity for the sake of status. Abstractions instead of clarity. Just enough noise to avoid seeing the truth too clearly. The strangest part? It works. The more convoluted the explanation, the more seriously it's taken. The more common sense it sounds, the more it's ignored. Why? Why do we act like the simple answer is a trap? We like to think we want clarity. That when a problem shows up, we'd rather fix it than complicate it. But that's not what we do. Not in meetings, not in policy, not in everyday life. We avoid simple answers even when they work. Especially when they work. You've seen it happen. Someone offers a basic fix, cheap, obvious, doable, and the room recoils. Too simple. Too easy. It makes people feel like they missed something. Like they're not smart enough if the answer is that plain. So instead of moving forward, we dig. We overanalyze. We add layers. We call in more people. We create work. Why? Because complexity feels like intelligence. Saying it's not that simple gives people a way out. It saves their ego. It lets them sound thoughtful while doing nothing. We do it in public health, education, business, personal lives. We know the basics. Eat better, sleep more, stop lying, listen when people talk. But those answers feel dull. They don't give us status, they don't make us look evolved, so we dress them up. We find research, buzzwords, apps, and programs to make the obvious seem advanced. That way we can nod along while avoiding the real discomfort. Doing the thing that works. This isn't about laziness, it's about avoidance. Simple answers often require real change. Real change is painful, so we make it look harder than it is. The real question isn't, why don't people know what to do? They often do. The question is, why do we make the right answer feel wrong just because it's simple? Before we go further, a few things need to be clear. Common sense, not wisdom, not moral truth. Just basic, functional judgment. It's what most people would do if they weren't overthinking. It's the straightest line between a problem and a solution. It's not perfect, but it often works. Intellectualization? A defense mechanism. Instead of feeling uncomfortable emotions or facing hard truths, we analyze them. We turn pain into theory. We talk instead of act. This isn't intelligence, it's avoidance dressed as thought. Cognitive bias against the obvious. Psychologist Gerd Gigerenzer calls it the complexity bias. We assume complex answers are smarter, that simple answers are naive. It's not about logic, it's about perception. Complexity signals status. Simplicity doesn't. This piece isn't about rejecting deep thinking or critical analysis. It's about noticing when those tools are being misused to distract, delay, or protect the ego. This isn't about anti-intellectualism, it's about clarity, knowing when something is being made harder than it needs to be, not to solve it, but to avoid it. The fear of simplicity isn't new. It runs deep through Western thinking. In ancient Greece, Socrates warned about the illusion of wisdom. He didn't attack ignorance, he attacked pretense. People who spoke in long, polished arguments but couldn't answer basic questions. He saw early what we still see now. Complexity can be used to hide confusion. Centuries later, the Enlightenment pushed logic and structure. Science advanced, so did systems of control. As knowledge expanded, so did the pressure to look informed. Intellectual status became a kind of currency. Knowing simple things wasn't enough, you had to explain them in complex terms, or risk looking foolish. In the 20th century, psychology caught up. Freud introduced the idea of defense mechanisms. One of them, intellectualization. People would turn emotion into analysis, feeling less, thinking more. It sounded smart, but it kept people stuck. Then came the rise of data. Metrics, models, frameworks. Big systems replaced small truths. We moved from gut checks to dashboards, and with that came a new kind of authority. The one who could speak the most abstractly. The person who made things sound hard became the one we listened to. In the early 2000s, Gerd Gigerenzer pushed back. He showed how fast and frugal thinking, using fewer steps, trusting instincts, often outperformed complex models. His work on heuristics revealed something unsettling. Sometimes knowing less gave better results. But people didn't want to hear that. They were too invested in complexity. They needed it to feel in control. Simplicity felt like a threat. Over time, this mindset shaped how we work, how we speak, how we solve problems. Simple ideas began to carry less weight. Not because they failed, but because they didn't impress. And that brings us here. A culture trained to distrust what feels obvious. A system that rewards noise over clarity. A public that often knows what works but doesn't trust it unless it sounds harder than it is. We don't avoid simple answers because they're wrong. We avoid them because they make us feel exposed. When something is simple, it leaves no place to hide. You can't say you didn't understand it. You can't blame the complexity. You can't defer it to a committee. It's just there, clear and raw. That kind of clarity forces a decision. It calls out delay. And for many people, that feels dangerous. Simplicity threatens ego. If the right answer is easy, then what's the point of all the years spent trying to be clever? If the right move is obvious, then why haven't we already done it? These questions hurt, so we dodge them. We pile on complexity until the pain is buried. It also threatens control. Complex systems give people cover. If a task requires 5 experts and 3 models, no one has to be responsible. Everyone can pass the blame. Simple solutions don't allow that. They demand action. They ask, if this works, why aren't you doing it? There's also identity. Many people build their self-worth around being thinkers. If a solution doesn't require deep thought, where does that leave them? Insecurity fills the gap, so they raise the floor. They make the answer more complicated, not because it needs to be, but because they need to feel needed. Then there's discomfort. Simple truths often carry emotional weight. You're tired because you never rest. Your marriage is falling apart because you avoid hard conversations. Your business is failing because you're chasing status instead of serving people. These are brutal to hear, so we add fluff. We find theories. We create problems we can't solve, just to avoid the one we can. At the root of it all is fear. Fear of looking foolish. Fear of being ordinary. Fear of having to act. Complexity becomes a shield. A way to stay safe even if it means staying stuck. Simplicity feels risky. Not because it's wrong, but because it's clear. And clarity demands courage. The brain doesn't just want answers. It wants to feel smart. And that creates a problem. When we hear a simple idea, something odd happens. Our minds resist it. Not because it's wrong, but because it doesn't give us the mental reward we're used to chasing. There's no complexity to solve, no puzzle to feel proud of. So the brain says, that can't be it. Keep digging. This is known as complexity bias. We assume hard answers are better answers. We also suffer from status quo bias. We'd rather change nothing than risk looking foolish for acting on something too simple. Then there's effort justification. If we've worked hard to understand something, we trust it more, even if it's worse than an easier method. Add to that our discomfort with uncertainty. A simple answer often feels incomplete. So we overthink, add variables, and distract ourselves from the truth just to feel in control. Emotionally, this is tied to self-worth. Many of us were taught that being smart is what makes us valuable. So we search for ways to prove it. Long words, theories, abstractions. We make problems harder so our solutions sound more impressive. When someone else gives a simple answer, it threatens that story. We also crave narratives that flatter us. Complex solutions often sound like elite knowledge, reserved for insiders. Following them gives us a sense of identity. Simple solutions don't offer that. They don't make us feel special. They just solve the problem, so we dismiss them. We say they're naive. We search for something deeper, even when we're just circling around the same truth we didn't want to face. And that's the trap. The brain wants to be clever more than it wants to be free. So unless we interrupt that loop, unless we learn to sit with the obvious, we'll keep ignoring what works in favor of what flatters. We're trained to distrust simplicity. In school, answers aren't rewarded unless they're framed with complexity. A clear insight won't get an A unless it's surrounded by citations and formal structure. We teach kids that the form matters more than the clarity, so they learn to speak in layers, not truth. In government and policy, leaders avoid the simple fix. Not because it wouldn't work, but because it doesn't play well on camera. Voters expect expertise, and expertise they've been told should sound hard. A straight answer sounds risky. So politicians use words like framework, initiative, multi-pronged approach. Simple action is delayed by performative complexity. In the workplace, the same rules apply. If you solve a problem too fast, you get questioned. If you solve it with a slide deck and buzzwords, you get promoted. Clarity doesn't scale well in organizations built to justify their own size. So people pad their emails, dress up their reports, and stretch 5-minute fixes into 6-month projects. Media makes it worse. Talking heads speak in circles. Experts debate definitions. No one just says, "This is common sense." Because if they did, the illusion would break. Viewers would realize they've been sold confusion for years just to keep tuning in. Even families do it. A kid tells the truth too directly and they're called rude. They're taught to soften it, dress it up, talk around it. Over time, they learn that honesty is risky and clarity is impolite, so they stop using it. Across the board, our systems reward the person who complicates, not the one who solves. And once that message is baked in, it sticks. We don't just avoid simple answers. We see them as threats to our image, our identity, and our role in the group. We'd rather be confused in public than clear and alone. We say we want results, but reward performance. We say we hate wasting time, but spend hours building around problems instead of fixing them. We celebrate intelligence, but mock the person who gives a plain answer. Not because it's wrong, but because it makes everyone else look like they missed something. We act like complexity is truth, like hard equals better. But most of the time, it's not. It's just harder. The contradiction runs deep. The tools we use to appear smart often make us act stupid. We overthink a basic step, then blame the system when it falls apart. We avoid the easy move, then pretend we didn't know it was there. Even worse, we build entire roles around it. Consultants, strategists, advisors, paid to say what a janitor might have noticed on day one. But no one listens to the janitor. He didn't say it in the right way. We pretend we're rational, but we're protecting pride. We pretend we're looking for truth, but we're looking for cover. And that's the trap. We confuse complexity for depth. We treat clarity like a threat. So we spend more time building around the answer than doing the thing that would fix it. Not because we're blind, because we're afraid to look simple. You can see the damage everywhere. In healthcare, people skip basic habits. Eat well, move, sleep, while chasing pills, supplements, and expensive programs. The obvious gets ignored unless it comes in packaging that feels advanced. In tech, software bloats with features no one needs. The core tool works fine, but simplicity doesn't sell. So companies build noise around it to seem sophisticated, and users get lost in it. In public policy, leaders stall on real change. Not because they don't know what to do, but because the simple fix sounds too plain. So they drag the issue through layers of strategic planning while the problem grows. In relationships, people go to therapy to talk through years of dysfunction while skipping the uncomfortable but clear truth. Honesty, consistency, and boundaries aren't complicated. They're just hard. We reward the appearance of effort over real solutions. We've created systems where the simplest fix is the least trusted. And over time, that changes how people think. They stop trusting what's clear. They look for friction where none is needed. The result? Slow action. Bloated budgets, emotional exhaustion. Not because the answers are missing, but because no one wants to say them out loud. They're too simple to feel safe. You don't need more information. You need fewer distractions. Start with this. When you hear a simple answer, pause before dismissing it. Ask yourself if you're rejecting it because it's wrong or because it threatens your image. If it works, it works. Let it. Second, pay attention to how people explain things. If someone makes a simple problem sound complex, they might not understand it, or they might be avoiding it. Either way, don't mistake effort for insight. Third, look at your own patterns. Do you add layers to avoid action? Do you wait for expert permission to do what you already know makes sense? Cut that noise. Start where the answer is clear. You don't have to prove you're smart. You have to act like it. And that starts by not running from what's simple just because it's uncomfortable. The smartest move is usually the one you've been avoiding because it's too obvious. Do it anyway. Picture the meeting again. The long speech, the charts, the nodding heads, and the one person in the corner who said the thing no one wanted to hear. Just do what worked last time. She wasn't wrong, she wasn't loud, but she was ignored. Not because she lacked insight, because she didn't dress it up. That's how we lose time. That's how we stay stuck. Not from lack of knowledge, but from fear of sounding too plain. So here's the question. How many answers are you still pretending aren't answers, just because they came too easy?